Good. Welcome to Chat Over Popcorn, where the conversations run deep. My name is Angela Anson, the host for the show. Today, I am here with Michael Brescher. Michael is the executive director at Boys to Men, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. Michael is pursuing a PhD in masculinity, social change, and violence prevention. His organization helps promote healthy masculinity in men. Michael, welcome to Chat Over Popcorn.
Thank you, Angela. I am so excited to be here this morning. I love chat over popcorn, and I'm really excited for this conversation with you.
Good, good, good. So, Michael, when it comes to our society, we typically put men and women in these specific boxes, right? And so today, our conversation is going to focus on the box that we have traditionally put men in, what we think masculinity is all about, manhood is all about. And I want us to talk more about how it end up affecting our relationships. So before we dive deeper into the conversation, why don't you tell us why you started Boys to Men and the work you are doing and why it's so important?
Yeah, I'd love to. Before I came to Boys to Men, I was doing domestic violence work with men. And it was really an eye-opening experience for me. Men of all different ages, backgrounds, experiences. And that work is really relationship work. And what became really clear to me quickly was it was these grown men who wanted to have good relationships, who wanted to have love and closeness with their children and with their families, but they were living out kind of the rule book and the playbook that they had been handed from an early age and didn't know how to have the things in their relationships they wanted and also live within these rules that they got. And the thing that became really clear, they always said, I wish somebody had talked to me about this when I was younger. And so that was really a part of my realization that we have to start doing work with boys a lot earlier and giving them opportunities to find their way in the world that aren't just kind of restricted to a more narrow idea of what their identity has to be.
Right. And it's funny that you mentioned the work you're doing with boys because really that's where it starts with, right? It's easy to train them right than trying to correct them later. And I think there's a famous quote out there. I can't really think of who came up with that. But it all starts with when you are young because that's how they grow up into these men and struggle with expressing emotions. And traditionally, when you are growing up society, while I don't have any brothers, definitely have friends who, growing up and playing together, boys, you have to be tough. You have to, have control and be dominant and, really be in control. And you see how just that mindset end up influencing these young men and ultimately when they become adults and how they express emotions. So let's talk about when it comes to men and their emotions. What are some of the things that are killing men silently that they are not able to openly express?
Right on. I think it's exactly what you said from, that from an early age, there's a lot of those messages, sometimes really loudly and sometimes more in a sneaky kind of way from the other men in our life about, like, stop crying. Why are you crying? Look at him, he's crying. And in the way that you'll be ridiculed and made fun of and that sort of thing for expressing emotions or for expressing tenderness. And so that kind of gets driven out of boys at such an early age. They learn to resent the part of themselves that feels, and to have shame about it and to hide it and to push it down and to look at it as a liability. And the thing is, they're not wrong, right? It is a liability because people are going to judge you and your status is going to go down based on how comfortable you are with your emotions. And so what that leads into, right, is then we're grown men experiencing all the pressures of everybody else that bring up all the feelings that everybody has, but with a deeply, almost unconscious, internalized belief that if I really feel these feelings, if I acknowledge these feelings, then I'm failing at my fundamental role as a person, and people aren't going to care about me if I do. If I'm not a real man, I'm going to lose love, I'm going to lose respect. And so out of the desire for love and respect, we're basically at war with ourselves. And we know that when those feelings don't come out, when they don't get relief, acknowledgement, validation. You know what I mean? That the suffering builds up, and when all that suffering is in there, it's coming out one way or the other. It's just going to come out sideways, and that's usually, it's going to it's going to be harmful for myself, for my family, in some kind of way.
Yeah, and you talked about even men don't cry, right? So I'll share a classic example with you. I lost my auntie a couple of years ago, and his son did not cry. Right? I mean, we were all sobbing, we were all crying and wailing, and he did not cry. And so I want us to talk about just using that as an example, right? Boys don't cry, but here is someone who have lost a mother and openly did not show what society would consider emotion. They didn't cry. So did he not cry because he is being a man and holding that emotions in, being the man for the family, the one that people can lean on, right, in these trying times? Or did he not cry because that is just how he's taught to behave as a man, to have composure? What is your take on the fact that, like you said, men and women, we go through the same emotions. How it's expressed is different, right? So a woman, you lose a mother, a father, a loved one. Your expression of it is different. The way you will cope with it is different. But men don't sometimes deal with it, and they don't cope with it well. And like you said, it manifests in all these wrong ways, where it may be in the form of anger, aggression, whatever. What is your take on how men deal with loss and the expression of the emotion as a result?
Yeah, I appreciate that example. I think one, to just acknowledge that there's a lot of pressure and rewards that's put on women a lot of times for being emotionally available, for being an emotional resource and for being empathetic. So right, to just acknowledge that women are a lot of times nurtured into that, whereas it can be more punished out of boys. And so I think in the example you shared, there can be several things going on. One, what kind of messages maybe has he gotten about exactly what you said about being man of the house? Everyone's looking to you, they're counting on you, they're depending on you. People are counting on your strength, basically. And so you have to hold it all together. And then I also think, to the degree, and sometimes it's not that boys observe. They observe how men relate to emotions. And they begin to see what has less value without anyone having to tell it to them. And they might not ever express it, but there can be kind of a silent knowing, so that I actually have a ton of fear that comes up in me as I feel my grief. As I feel my grief, and I feel my pain, and I feel my sadness, and I realize how on the verge I am of being overwhelmed in those emotions, and to the degree, again, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that I think if I express these things, I might lose love and respect, which I need now more than ever. Then my fear is coming up in equal parts, and so I think there's a lot of just conflict that's there right now, and I think that question of grief, and the men in my life, the men I have relationships with, their unfelt grief is one of the biggest blockers and sources of undiagnosed, everyday walking around depression. I think men in our society tend to totally not have a relationship to grief. I'll give you one quick example here, which is I have had a similar kind of tragic situation going on with my family, with our mom, who's ill. And I was talking to a brother of mine recently about it, and he was kind of freaking out and having a lot of anxiety and trying to control all of these behaviors from all of these different people, and nobody was doing what he wanted them to do, and you see, right, how it gets into controlling behavior and violence. And I was just like, hey man, I realize you're trying so hard to do all this stuff to fix it, but have you considered just being sad?
Right.
Because the situation's just sad, and you're trying so hard to fix it, and I don't think you can fix it, so have you considered just being really, really sad about the situation?
Whoa. What happened? We lost Michael. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. We lost Michael. You're gonna try and get him back on.
You might try to reopen the Zoom link.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I should say something about sorry about that. We lost connection. You just had to get back on. Let me know when to go, no?
It's go.
Okay. So sorry, guys. We lost connection. That's what happened when you go live. Things happen. So we apologize. But we got Michael back on. So Michael was sharing a story about his friend and the loss he experienced. And I'm going to let Michael continue from there. Go ahead, Michael.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, you know, and I had kind of shared the most of it, but just, you know, it was my brother, and I suggested to him, and I really mean it, you know, there's a devaluing and a misunderstanding of the power of feeling our feelings amongst men. You know, there's an illiteracy, and so just, I suggested to him that your entire relationship to this situation that's causing you so much suffering could change if you would just go into feeling all the way sad about it and grieving a really tragic situation that you cannot control and feeling those feelings, and it hurts. And be with that hurt. And instead of feeling that hurt, he was trying to control all these things and save the day and do stuff he couldn't do to fix it. And I guess my point is, when I told him, have you considered just trying to feel sad about it? I mean, as you can imagine, right, that was the most preposterous thing he had ever heard.
Of course.
You know, basically laughed about it. He's like, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's allowing your heart to break. Like, just let your heart break so that you can feel what you are feeling, right? There's time for everything. Time to mourn, time to be happy. And so there's really nothing wrong with, you know, experiencing like a loss of a mother, right? And to keep it all in. And when you are in a relationship, I know we are trying to bring it back into relationship, but when you're in a relationship where either it's a long-term commitment or a marriage, and you are keeping all of that in, right? And you are not letting your partner in on your feeling because you are keeping it together. So your partner probably think you it's not affecting you. Meanwhile, it's probably really affecting you in the worst possible way. And so that's going to affect your communication, because guess what? You have no outlet. You are not asking for help. And you talked about your friend. Yeah, I don't blame him thinking what you had to say was the most preposterous thing he's heard, because growing up, men don't cry, don't ask for help, and any sign of compassion or even empathy is seen as weakness. And so even when you're in a relationship or in a marriage, that frustration in just how you are even going to be communicating how you are feeling coming out in the wrong way, my goodness, I just can't wrap my head around. So now on the flip side though, right, men are supposed to be this individuals who provide protection and be a provider, really. So we still want men to do that. I think where I struggle with, or what I think is happening, is when we talk about being emotionally available. Some people see it as a weakness in the sense that they're not thinking be mentally strong, right? So when we think of strength or strong men, we are looking at the physique, the physical. But it's bigger than that. It's really about being mentally strong. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes even in like the conversations about healthy masculinity, it can kind of like feel like it comes down into an either or. And so a lot of men, I think, are like, you know, you're just asking me to be like weak and feminine, and if that's what you're asking me to do, you know, like, you can do it, but no thanks.
Right.
Right? And I think there are more mature ideals of masculinity that have been examples in a lot of different cultures for a long time, where we can have strength and fierceness and protection, and have, like, you know, that warrior energy, that important protector energy, and also just be whole human beings, exactly like you said, you know, who can show up for all of the seasons of our experience and our emotions. And so I think what it really is, it's about a very immature idea of what the masculine is. It's a caricature where it's like, no, I just have to be the strong, dominating thing, and if I'm this other stuff, I can't still do this. And I think that's where the misunderstanding takes place.
Yeah, and I talk about the 8 dimensions of wellness on the Chat About Popcorn platform. And it dawned on me this morning as I was getting ready, and I realized how when it comes to even the achieving optimal wellness all round, right? When it comes to women, we are highly focused on achieving the social wellness, making sure we have friends that we can, talk to, that we can share our feelings with, that can help us regulate and manage these emotions, emotional wellness, right? We just talked about that. And also spiritually being well. But for the men, these things are highly influenced by how well they are from a career and financial standpoint, right? As a protector, as a provider, if your finances is not intact, your career is not up to par, it's going to create confusion. And so that's what we see. I want us to talk a little bit, Michael, on the power struggle that we see in a relationship when it comes to even if the woman is the breadwinner or the woman is bringing home the most of the income, how some men can feel emasculated, right? And it may be manifested in the form of the guy feeling that he is weak, and so the way he can maintain power or authority is by sometimes abusing the woman, right? Whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's physical abuse. So let's talk about how just that dynamic, right? When the career and financial wellness is flipped upside down for the guy, how that influenced his behavior in the relationship.
Yeah, it's a great question, Angela. And I think, I just want to say, I think, sometimes that language of the toxic masculinity language, it can be alienating for people. And they're like, that's messed up. Masculinity is not toxic. Why are you saying that? And that's true. Masculinity is not toxic. What that term is referring to, toxic masculinity, what it means is the way that some men get so caught up unconsciously with stereotypes that they lose their own humanity and their human relationships in the worship and the pursuit of these stereotypes, these gender box roles, these really narrow kind of abstract ideas of who I'm supposed to be. And so what you're talking about is a wonderful classic example of how it happens. If and what happens is when men are taught by other men to idolize and be fascinated with this ideal, this stereotype, they develop deep shame relationships with themselves, right? It's like we're talking about earlier. You have to beat up on the part of yourself that grieves. You have to beat up on you got to hide it. You got to get rid of it. And so there's a deep shame relationship where deep down, I'm not this ideal. I'm not this stereotype. I'm a person with full experiences. I have moments of weaknesses. I need other people. I need help. You know what I mean? I'm a whole human.
Yeah.
But if anyone finds that out, if I find that out, then I have no value because I'm idolizing this thing. And so what happens is then in my relationship, there becomes this fierce terrain where I'm trying to work out my own demons that I have with this, oh my gosh, what if I'm not a real man? And so every time the women in my life do any behavior that I can construe as changing the order, crossing lines, switching then I have a fierce and oftentimes violent, oppressive, problematic duty to put things back in order, because if things aren't in order, then it means the worst thing about my whole life and identity, and I'm doing everything I can to run from that fear. You know what I mean? So it's a nightmare relationship with a social idea, and I'm playing it out by hurting this person who's trying to love me, basically.
Yeah, I love how you put it. The work you are doing is so fantastic because, like you said, it will take other men to help even break that social norm for other men, right? If other men can gather around like you do with your men and let them know that, look, it is okay. It truly is okay that your wife or your partner makes more money than you do. Like, at the end of the day, it's about a team, right? It's a team effort. And so who cares what amount this person is bringing versus that person. And so it's so sad when you hear stories where, you know, because of the woman's success in career or money, and the guy feeling insecure, and because they are feeling insecure, tend to abuse the woman to kind of suppress them and oppress them and bring them down to where society think they belong. Like, how crazy is that?
Yeah, it's because, right, like my own diminished sense of self has become so low because of this idea of the man I'm supposed to be, that I am now so fragile, right, that anything that is a threat, I have to do, and it costs so much, you know. And I've sat in circle with so many men who are 70, 80, 90 years old, and their life is in ruins, and they're full of regret. Kids aren't close to them, have a ton of failed relationships, and they're just now like, oh, yeah, that really wasn't necessary. That cost me way too much, my determination to be a man. And just as a side note, man, of all the problems you can have, I'm here knocking on the door for the day that my partner gets a raise higher than me. That's a great problem to have. Come through. I definitely, man. Keep me at my house. I'm good with that, you know?
I know. And it's like, it's helping offset the stress, you know. Speaking of stress, that's the other thing too, right? Is men equates sadness, loneliness, everything to stress. And then we can talk about just what that look like. And if you are feeling stressed, how can you show up for your family? So yeah, if your wife is making more money than you, hallelujah, right? I mean, I would say, I think society though, let's talk about the women a little bit, right? So women, some women, and if you don't agree, go ahead and put your comments and let me know what you are thinking. But I think traditionally too, right? Women, because we see men as the provider, as the protector, right? For me personally, if my man is not making more money than I am, but they are working hard, right? They are trying, they are building, they are doing something productive in society, right? A purpose, something. To me, I will have respect for that more so than the dollars that's actually coming in. But I think us women, you know, you and I, we got to do a better job in helping these women, these men, in how they sometimes feel about themselves that Michael is talking about. So the other thing I want to talk about, Michael, is traditionally to our society, women tend to be gravitated towards or get attracted to men who quote unquote appear as the manly man, right? Men who are very stoic, sometimes don't show emotions. Let's talk about, in your line of work, have you experienced men sharing that concern that maybe I am this way because I'm trying to get the women?
Yeah, definitely. You know, and it's something that has come up a lot in doing, you know, again, that sort of anti-violence work with men, the domestic violence work with men, is a lot of what comes out will be, well, this is what she wants. Well, I'm doing this, you know, because if I do what you're saying, then she won't care about me, she'll lose respect, etc. So I think that's definitely the case, you know, and you can look at like historical reasons and cultural reasons for why, you know, there may be like certain expectations and preferences, and then also at the end of the day, it's like, you know, the stuff we're talking about, you know, with toxic masculinity and how boys are raised, it's not like women aren't raised the same way, you know, like we're all getting the same, we're all swimming in the same water, so to speak. You know, but the conversation that I have with men is like, regardless, you have to live from your own authenticity and trust that living from your place of authenticity, people will come in your life who love you, and that's a good thing. And that if you're not living from your authentic place, you're going to struggle, you know, and so it's still the work to say, like, whatever it is that other folks are wanting or whatever pressures you're feeling, you are the only person that's going to be responsible for you living your best life. But it's definitely the case what you're saying. You know, I know that these same social pressures act on women.
Yeah. So the other thing too that I want us to cover is when it comes to men and their expression of emotions. recently I did a video, and this lady sent me a private message, and she was talking about how, um, I, no, the video I did was addressing communication, right? Communication in relationship. And a lot of women actually put comments in the video, but this one particular woman sent a private message, and she was talking about what if you are uh, trying to communicate with your partner, and your partner is, again, stoic, don't show any emotion, don't want to even communicate. They seem uninterested, right? They don't care about what you have to say. And then somebody else said, I don't have a right to even ask. I don't want to go into detail with the story, but women feeling that they are not even worthy to ask certain questions to their husband, knowing very well that their husband is not doing the right thing. I want to talk about just how women can allow or help support men in their vulnerability, where they can be emotionally available. We're not talking about men going around and crying. No, that's not the point of this conversation, right? But how women can support men in being vulnerable, and how men can receive the support and actually show vulnerability and be emotionally available to their partners.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think one thing that I really encourage that may seem small, but it can be mighty. It's like tending a garden. Um, you know, in a lot of parenting classes, Angela, you and I are both parents. We've talked about the struggle, your struggle with these little ones. You'll hear this phrase, "catch them being good."
Yeah.
And just that idea that when it comes to relationships, it's so much easier to like nurture what you want. And so what I do think is I see the thing about like the man box and the stereotype is it to the degree that it isn't a workable way to be in the world, there's always leaks, there's always breaks, there's always cracks. And I think for women in relationships with men, to the degree that you can validate and nurture every tiny victory that you see coming through, like, hey, honey, I heard you like telling me you were tired earlier today, and that really helped me to know like what was going on with you to hear that you were tired. So I really appreciate your willingness to open up. I know it's hard to open up sometimes. I just want to say like thank you so much. That really helped me to meet your needs better and show up in this relationship. Like, honey, I heard you like talk to your friend earlier today. I overheard you kind of like telling him how you're doing, and I just want to tell you like I'm really glad to hear that. I know it can be hard, but I know how helpful it is to open up about the things we have going on, and I'm glad you can talk to someone. I mean, every little, no matter how minor the feeling or the emotion or whatever is, moments of grief, of sadness, of feeling, and, not to make like a big show out of it, but just acknowledge, nurture, validate, and communicate, hey, it's valuable and helpful to me as you learn to connect with your feelings. I think that is one really small thing that over time can really add up and go a long way.
Yeah. It's the little things that counts. It's not the big moments. So I totally appreciate it. Now, the other thing that I want us to cover a little bit as we get ready to wrap up our conversation has to deal with just the way men express anger and frustration, right? So we talked about, how they are taught at a very young age to not cry, not show emotion, except if you are angry. Then when you are angry, you see it. There's a physiological imbalance. It's very clear. How can men effectively work through their emotions, right? So we talk about seeking help and all of that, but practical ways that they can take and apply to unpacking some of these, because if you're talking about men, they've been living this way for 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, right, for a very long time. So someone who is maybe listening to us and it's like, yeah, what they are saying makes sense, I want to make a change. How did they go about undoing that mindset, years of these social constructs that they have lived under?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll say one, there's a lot of really good resources these days, specifically around helping men do some of this work. And that's also something I'm happy to share. But I think in terms of practical steps, I'll tell men a lot, because anger is powerful and it's useful. Anger is a good part of our lives when we have the right relationship with it. But I think a lot of times for men, I'm angry or I'm pissed off or I'm irritated actually just means I don't like how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Right? So everything becomes anger because men are allowed to express anger. You can be validated for expressing anger. No one's going to judge you. But if you have sadness underneath it, so a lot of times I'm feeling sad, but I'm emoting anger. I'm feeling hurt, but I'm emoting anger. I'm feeling confused, but I'm emoting anger. And that's the socialization process. And so there's actually 3 steps that we work through a lot with men that honestly are just tremendously helpful. Before I started doing this work, I lived 30 years of my body rarely knowing how I was feeling and actively trying not to know how I was feeling until I started to do some of this work. And so what we always tell men is 3 steps. One, and this is in the moment, in the heat of the moment when you're really feeling, identify the emotion. And if it's anger, then go deeper. What's under it? Okay, I'm feeling angry. I guess the truth is that really hurt my feelings, the way you just talked to me. Or when you said that, it really scared me. So identify the actual emotion. 2, accept it. Like, not only does it not make you less to have those feelings, it's what makes you a person, is feelings. It's what's making you a human being and making you alive. You're not less than. This is a good thing that you feel in the world. When you stop feeling in the world, you should be scared, right? So identify it, accept it, and then the third thing is just to share it. It might be in the moment, hey, Angela, the truth is I'm feeling really scared about this whole other unrelated situation that's going on, and that's why I'm acting this way. Or if not in the moment, it might be like, I'm going to journal about it. I'm going to go talk to my friend about it later. I'm going to call my dad and talk to him about it. But if we can identify it, accept it, and share it, then that little small practice of in the moment checking in, it can really grow to where a year from now, I'm having much more intimate relationships and much more relational satisfaction just by practicing a little bit of awareness.
Yeah. When you were talking, the one thing I was thinking about is honesty. Just being honest with your feelings. Yeah. It's being honest. I really like when you said, even being able to be brave enough to say what you did hurt my feelings. Like, I mean, how powerful for a guy to be able to say to you, what you did hurt my feelings. That tells us women that, yeah, you do have feelings. And we got to cater to those feelings, right? Because us women, we will easily tell you, that wasn't very nice. Even my 4-year-old daughter would tell you, what you said hurt my feelings, mama, right? Yeah. I don't have a son. Like I said, I didn't grow up with any brothers. So I'm always interested in this conversation and just how men, behave and how they express their emotions. And even particularly, so I was born in Ghana, so from a cultural background, right? Growing up, even just being able to say, I love you, right? Most men are not raised that way from that background, that culture, to be able to express and I love you to their family, whether it's the wife or the children or whatever. So before I let you go, let's talk a little more on just the freedom to be able to share how you feel and to be able to tell someone, communicate your feeling, tell someone that you love, that I love you, just how important that is in relationship that some women may be deprived of.
Yeah, and just to say, a routine question I ask when I do workshops with men is I'll say, tell me the last time you looked another adult in the face and said, that hurt my feelings.
Wow, yeah.
And mark that, and then when's the last time your feelings got hurt? Because mine probably got hurt this morning, but I might not have paid the sentence for 16 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's a good check-in. There's this book from Bell Hooks, who is a feminist author and advocate. She is a real wonderful thinker, and it's called The Will to Change, and it's on men, masculinity, and love. It's a beautiful, accessible book for men. I totally recommend it. But she really says in there, the crux of the issue is that you can have domination and control, which feels good sometimes, right? Or you can have love.
Right.
And I have them both. Right? That to have the joy and the beauty and the power of that contact, of being totally seen, totally accepted. You know, the peak of relationship, intimate experience, to have that, control has to go away and risk has to open up.
Right.
And so that's the core of it for men, is if we're not willing to make that risk and let it in, we're missing so much. And the thing is, some part of us knows that we're missing it. And so I think, to your point, the thing for men is, one, just to realize, probably, this is how it was for me, I have a huge unconscious block in my body, which is how I was raised as a man, that keeps me constantly just wriggling to be in control and kind of compulsively saying things that may or may not be true about my own internal state, because I'm trying to protect myself and cover, whatever. And letting that go and beginning to just take total risks of telling people how you feel and letting it be a mess.
Yeah.
And that as I began to do that and be like, the truth is I'm scared. The truth is I'm hurt. The truth is I'm confused. The truth is I'm afraid to tell you the truth. You know what I mean? As I began to do that, I can begin to have love and acceptance, and a lot of the most fearful and hurting places in myself as a man can actually get touched and remedied by the people that are close to me, and then I can be whole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can have the things in my life I want, but it's never going to happen until I'm willing to let go of that control place and just face some of those fears, and it's not so bad.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Since we started this platform, of course, people don't know me, right? And sometimes it's easier to open up to someone that is a stranger than to your loved one, right? So I'll share another example. A young guy sent us a private message, and he's in a long distance relationship, and for 6 years. So earlier I was talking about even some men not saying I love you. But here's a guy, right? He sent a message and he was saying he's in a long distance relationship with a woman that he's been saying I love you for 6 years, right? And this woman is not able to even reciprocate it. She's unable to say it back. And so even when I was thinking about our conversation, I was thinking about just how even women, how we sometimes prevent men from even wanting to open up, right? So a man is opening up, he's being vulnerable, and yet our response is inhibiting him from moving forward. And now, in the absence of not knowing how this woman feel about this guy, but just use it for conversation's sake, right? Just thinking about how it's important for men to be seen in that way, right? So here's a man opening up, being vulnerable, and yet their partner is not reciprocating it. And so I can imagine he's gonna probably shut down at some point, right? So if this relationship don't progress to anything in the future, and he brings in somebody else, he's gonna shut down. In your experience working with all these men, do you find out that sometimes men are trying, like those who are woke, those who are aware of what is happening and how important it is to debunk that toxic masculinity? Have you come across men who are trying their best to be seen, to be open, to be vulnerable, and because of, again, society and external pressures, they cave in and close down?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a certain sense, like that is the situation. The situation is that boys are born whole. They're born whole, and it's a struggle to keep hold of that wholeness against a lot of pressures that demean and dehumanize you for keeping it. And I do think, so in a lot of the work that we do with men who are in relationships, it's really helpful if someone is supporting their partner. So when I was doing domestic violence work, we would work with the men, but we also had an advocate that was supporting his partner, because she's not used to him doing the right thing either. You know what I mean? When I began to open up to my partner, when I began to work on my own healing and my wholeness, she had never had a man be vulnerable, authentic, whole with her before, ever.
Yeah.
In that kind of way. And so she had to learn too. And so absolutely there were moments where she couldn't handle it. and was like, like, I can't handle what's happening right now. This is
It's
too much.
foreign to her. Yeah.
What's that?
No, I said it's foreign to her. It's get it together. Like this is new. What is going on?
And so I do think if it's gonna, it's helpful if it's in the context of a committed, high trust relationship, but it's gonna take time, and there's gonna be false starts, and there's gonna be like hurtful reactions, and there has to be enough trust to keep coming back
Yeah.
and trying again, because it's not just the man who's trying to start practicing something totally new usually, right? It's also the woman he's in a relationship with. She has no framework for what he's doing either.
Yeah, yeah. It's let me see if we have any comments in here that we want to ask or call out. My husband put a comment. He said, "Men should not run from their emotions. You have to face your emotions." That's pretty powerful. You have to face your emotions. And then he also said that finance is only an issue when the man is lazy. If you are physically and mentally well, but choose to sit around and play video games, that's a problem. I think my husband is a little tough on the men sometimes. Oh, Michael, so this has been a great conversation. Thank you for engaging me in this conversation. This is very important that people, men and women, really hear what people like you are doing in the community and helping bring awareness on these issues so that most relationship can be well managed. Because I did another video in the past with a pastor where we were talking about just emotions and how it spirals down in marriages and the effects that it takes on the couple. And I think a lot of men, society, we have a lot of people on social media that's always talking about toxic masculinity, but there is also a healthy component that I think a lot of times we don't hear more information on, right? How you can express your emotions in a healthy way and have a more fulfilling relationship. So I really want to thank you for coming and engaging me in this conversation. And hopefully people are inspired by what you talked about. I'm certainly inspired. And since my husband was watching, I know he's been inspired. And I want to thank you for coming today. And hopefully we can have more conversations on this topic on different angles and look at it from a different point of view as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela, I'm so grateful for this conversation today, and grateful for your work and just the space that you hold. I think it's so important. Just the heart that you bring to these conversations, and I know it blesses a lot of people. So I'm grateful for a chance to be a part of the good work that you're doing today.
Oh, thank you. That was so kind. Thank you. Likewise, I feel the same way. Please invite me to one of your events. I would love to be a part of it. I love listening to men talk and just being part of a conversation that's helping move positive change in our society. So I thank you. I thank you. Well, you take care and kisses to the babies and have a wonderful day, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And guys, remember, our truths are best lived when we're there the moment. Until next time, take care. All right, Michael, I will talk to you later, okay? Thank you so much.